Welcome, ghouls. It's Season 2, Episode 5 of the Shrouded in Darkness podcast, where we shine a light on the cases that the world forgot. This is your true crime-obsessed host, Marlena. We have several sources for today's episode. Wikipedia, All That's Interesting, the FBI.gov website, the Final Hours podcast, Morbid Podcast, and the Cold Case Detective TV show. Today's case takes us to New Mexico, a small town in the city of Valencia. Allow me to introduce you to Tara Leigh Calico. Born February 28, 1969, to Patty and David Calico. Her parents later divorced, and she remains living with her mother. Tara is described as adventurous, athletic, independent, smart, and incredibly kind. At the time of this case, Tara is a 19-year-old college student living with her mother and stepfather, John Dole, in Belen, New Mexico. This is the small town in Valencia. She has 2 older brothers and 2 younger stepsisters. She majors in psychology and attends a college only 15 minutes away from her home, the University of New Mexico. Every morning, Tara goes on an approximate 34-mile bike ride. I believe this was basically the ride to her school, so half that mileage there and the rest returning home. I don't know how many of you routinely ride your bikes, but that's a long trek. Now, Tara's mother, Patty, she used to join her for these trips, but recently she stopped going because she felt like they were being followed or watched. It sounds like maybe there was one specific incident where she just felt super uncomfortable, but it was enough to make her not want to go again. This didn't change Tara's mind. She didn't want to give up what she enjoyed. She was such an outdoor enthusiast, and she wasn't about to live in fear. The way she looked at it, she was used to this ride. It was within the community that she loved. It was to her school, and she'd never had issues before. Also, just for the record, Tara had no known enemies and never had problems with the law. It sounds like she was all around just a good kid. So it's September 20th, 1988. Like any other day, Tara plans for an early morning bike ride. After the ride, she plans to meet her boyfriend, Jack Cole, for a tennis match around 12:30. Then, her first class of the day starts around 4 p.m. Before she leaves for her ride at 9:30, to ease Patty's concern, she tells her mother that if she's not back by noon, that she could come look for her. Tara said this almost like a joke, but also because she didn't want to miss her tennis date. Well, 12 p.m. passes. At 12:05, Patty follows through with Tara's request. She goes to look for her, following her usual path, but there are no signs of Tara or her bicycle. So Patty returns home, with the hopes that maybe she just missed Tara. But she's not home either. So Patty goes to wake John, and just added FYI, John does work the night shift, so that's why he was still in bed at noon. So together, they make some calls to local hospitals. They want to make sure Tara didn't have some kind of an accident. But there are no patients by her name, nobody that matched her description. So then they start making calls to the boyfriend, the friends, but no one has seen or heard from Tara. The next logical step is to call the Valencia police, because with what we know about Tara, this was way out of character for her. The sheriff agrees and quickly gets a search underway. Within a few hours of that initial phone call to the police, the NCIC, which is the National Crime Information Center, is notified. These teams, along with family and friends, start the search for the missing 19-year-old. The first day of searching ended with no clear answers. Still no signs of Tara or her bike. On day 2, 2.5 miles away from her home, someone finds some odd tire tracks, multiple tire tracks. One set looks like it belongs to a vehicle, like a car or a truck, and one set looks like it belongs to a bicycle. There was also evidence of some of the tracks kind of skidding off the west side of the road, almost like the bike was being dragged. So this all could be indicative of signs of a struggle. So in addition to this, parts of what they believed was Tara's Walkman and cassette tape were also found. And then a few days later, about 20 miles away from the search area from her home, more pieces of that same Walkman were found, and this was at the entrance to a remote campground. So the following week, the police takes all this information. They launch a ground and aerial search of that campground and the surrounding area. There were men on foot, men with hounds, men on horseback, aerial searches, and so on. After the news spread through media, some witnesses came forward. 7, actually. All said they had seen Tara that day, that she was somewhere along her bike ride, the routine. And then 5 of those 7 witnesses said that they also saw an old, light-colored pickup truck closely following behind Tara. And they said that it seemed like either Tara wasn't fully aware that the truck was even there, or that she was just not concerned with it. She had on her little earbuds or whatever for the Walkman. She was listening to music. She was enjoying her ride. Now, a few of those witnesses are able to describe the driver in the truck. They describe them as a 35 to 45-year-old male with red hair. They also said there were multiple people in the vehicle. Now, the last known witness that saw her, they saw her at 11:45, and they said that she was heading toward her home. So, up until this point, Tara was right on schedule. Despite this, there are no clear leads to follow. Weeks pass, and then months. Still nothing. No leads, no evidence. We move on to June 15th, 1989. So we're 9 months past when she disappeared. In some 1,500 miles away from the New Mexico home, there is a strange Polaroid found in a Port St. Joe, Florida convenience store parking lot. In this picture, you see a young boy and a girl with their hands tied behind their backs, and their mouths are covered with black tape. Both people appear Caucasian, and in the background you see what looks like maybe the interior of a van, like a work van. So the female is staring directly at the camera with this sad or maybe angry expression. The young boy in the picture looks absolutely terrified. And just a note on the person that did find this photo, as soon as she saw the picture, she turned it over to the authorities. She turned it over to the police. She also let them know that where she found the photo, a white van had been parked there. Well, the police send this picture to the media. They're hoping someone could identify the people that are in the picture. It takes a month for the news of the photo to make its way to New Mexico, to Tara's family. And her parents, Patty and John, strongly feel that it's her in that picture. I mean, there's the hair color, the hairline, the way her hair kind of has like a little bit of a cowlick. There's a scar on her leg. There's even a photo. In the photo, there's also a book pictured. That book happens to be one of Tara's favorite titles. It was My Sweet Audrina by V.C. Andrews. And I've seen the photo rules. There are some definite similarities between the person in the picture and Tara. As for the boy in the photo, in a weird coincidence, another New Mexico couple, they claim that that's their son in the picture, their 9-year-old missing son, Michael Henley. Sadly, it ends up not being him. Michael's remains are eventually found in June of 1990. And they're in the area where he went missing, which was, he and his dad were on a hunting camping trip, and Michael just kind of wandered off and got lost. They never could find him. Apparently, he wandered off a few miles away from their campsite. And after the autopsy, it did show there was no foul play involved, that he just died of exposure from, like, the weather and the land. And nothing else has been said about that photo, about the boy that's in the photo. I've not been able to find any other details on that. So as far as I know, it's still very unknown. Around the same time, the FBI comes in and they take over Tara's case. They examine the Polaroid. They learn the specific film wasn't available until May of 1989, which would have been 8 months after Tara disappeared. More than helping, this brings doubt to the possibility of the photo being Tara. So just one thing I want to say is multiple departments and authorities were looking at this photo, examining it, and honestly, everyone was kind of conflicting. Some people thought it was her. Some people thought there was no way it could be her. But it all comes back down to Tara's mother, Patty. She never felt different about that photo. Up until the day of her death, she thought Tara was in that Polaroid. She knew that was her daughter. And just as an added tidbit, her mother does pass away in 2006, and she never learns what happened to her daughter. Okay, so back to the timeline. In 1991, Patty and John Dole, the stepfather, they are still very deeply involved in their missing daughter's case, and some reports actually state that the pair become deputized by the Valencia police so that they could further assist in the case. And what this means basically is they were able to pursue leads, they were able to use the police officers' resources to print flyers and such, so they were really able to get hands-on. We move on to 1998, so this is 10 years after that day she went missing. A judge has officially declared Tara as deceased and rules her death a homicide. I don't know how common this was when there were no remains and there was no evidence. Everything was so lacking, but they still wanted to rule it as a homicide. So now we move on to 2008. 20 years since Tara went missing. A new theory emerges when a new sheriff is appointed to the Valencia police force. This is Sheriff Rene Rivera. He claims to know what happened to Tara. Come to find out, he had actually been brought in as a deputy back in 1989. And he'd basically been investigating this case ever since. Like, it was always part on his radar. According to him, he believed that Tara was abducted by someone she knew, that it was at least 2 teenage boys that were in that pickup truck that witnesses saw. He thinks that they were taunting Tara, probably hit her with a truck, made her fall, kidnapped her, killed her, dumped her body. Now, he admits this theory, but he refuses to name any names. He apparently hopes that someone will come forward, someone that knows what happened, or someone that was even involved. But nothing else comes of this. There's still no evidence, still no remains, and nothing could really be done. I mean, this was literally just the sheriff's theory. Now we move on to 2013. Case files are revealed to the public at this time, and Rivera's interesting theory becomes a little more promising. So in these case files, a witness had come forward. His name was Henry Brown. He was an 83-year-old man with death knocking on his door, and he had something to get off his chest. At the time of Tara's disappearance, Henry was a resident of Valencia. He would often party with some of the local teens, even though he was a little bit older. But on one particular night, he was at one of these parties that was at a trailer. The trailer belonged to Lawrence Romero Jr. And if you remember, Lawrence Romero Sr. would have been the sheriff in 1988 when Tara disappeared. Well, so the friends at the party start talking about Tara, start talking about her case. They're almost like they're bragging about what they did to her. They're confessing. So they're saying that they saw Tara on her back that day, that they hit her with a truck, they took her to a gravel pit, they sexually assaulted her. She fights back. She tries to fight back. She tells them she's turning them over to authorities. They're not going to get away with this. Well, they stab her. Specifically, it sounds like Lawrence Jr. stabs her, and then they dispose of the body. During this confession, Lawrence states that the law enforcement has his back, and if anyone tries to rat him out, no one would even believe him. So, according to Henry Brown's interview file, he named Lawrence Romero Jr., David Silva, Leroy Chavez, and an unnamed redhead, all as being involved in Tara's case. But that's not all. Henry Brown wasn't the only one that had this story, that heard this story. A second person came forward, Donald Dutcher, and he corroborates this whole theory from that Henry Brown is saying in a separate interview. According to Donald, Lawrence Romero Jr. and someone named Charles Houghton, I believe is how you say his last name, that these two people were involved in Tara's murder, and that there were two other peoples involved. He just didn't know their names. So now we have Sheriff Rivera, Henry Brown, and Donald Dutcher, all with a very similar theory of what happened to Tara. Plus, witnesses claimed they saw a redhead driving the truck, which suits one of the testimonies. But also, we know that there were those random tracks found in the area that could have shown signs of distress. This also fits that narrative. And you have to think, too, if this was a routine for Tara, that means a lot of people were aware that she did this bike ride every day, every morning. So maybe that all kind of plays into this of being a major possibility. So sadly, despite all of this, despite these testimonies, the allegations go nowhere. There's still no evidence. There's still no body. There's no remains. Plus, by the time all of this finally comes out, it appears the suspects, or at least the main suspect, has already passed away. Lawrence Romero Jr., he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound back in 1991. And what's an added craziness to this is there's a rumor that he had a suicide note. And in that note, he confessed to the murder of Tara. Again, that's a rumor. I don't know how true that is. People say that it is true and that the sheriff, who would have been his dad at the time, that he had to help basically hide that and get rid of the evidence of him confessing. I don't know how true that is, but that is part of one of the speculations I've heard. So now we're going to move on to 2016. We're introduced to a new lead investigator, Joseph Rowland. He knew, kind of obvious, that there had been a lot of changes in technology since 1988. So he wanted to come in and start from scratch. One thing that he did learn, that broken Walkman that was found, people thought that was Tara's. He confirmed that it wasn't. According to what he found, those items were too old to belong to Tara, that it was just a really bad coincidence. In October 2020, the investigators received the results of a 2-year independent analysis of the criminal case. This was conducted by a nonprofit organization, the Rocky Mountain Information Network. And this helped the team focus on the local suspect theory, including the property search of a Valencia residence. There's no other details about this. That's just what I've been able to find. So then we move on to June of 2023. Police announced that they have identified the offenders. They've sent information to the district attorney to start the process of filing charges. So now the monumental task of going through 3 decades of case files, all this falls on that team of attorneys. And they have to make sure everything is in order. They may have to make sure that any and all suspects can be ruled out. You know, there's the beyond a reasonable doubt that has to be the case for conviction to happen. And guys, this is where the case is today. That's the last bit of information I've been able to find. And I really hope one day justice for Tara Leigh Calico and her family is found. For the record, as with most unsolved cases, there are other theories of what could have happened to Tara, so I will share a few of those. Some believe that she may have fled on her own, that it was purely her choice to disappear. Others think that maybe an elaborate serial kidnapper was involved, and this could easily tie back to that Polaroid if it was in fact her in that picture. Around this same time, in that area, there was another serial killer going around. He was known as the Toy Box Killer. His real name was David Parker Ray. So he was prominent in this time, in this area, but he would eventually be ruled out because there was no real connection. So, of course, I do believe that most people that have followed and studied this case, they feel everything kind of lies within that town, that maybe it is the local people involved. That Tara's beautiful life ended entirely too soon in the hands of someone she knew. A couple other things I want to share that may or not be relevant to the case, but I want to mention them. The day Tara disappeared, she'd actually been riding her mother's neon pink Huffy bike. Something was wrong with hers, like a flat tire or something, but just in case that's relevant, she was on a pink bike that day. Also, there are conflicting reports on Tara's boyfriend's name. Now, earlier I mentioned it was Jack Cole. That's who she was getting ready to go on a tennis date with. Well, at one point during my research, which there was a lot of research, but I found someone else's name, Jeff Abeda. His name was also brought up, saying that this was also a boyfriend of Tara during this time, but that they had recently broken up. Now, I don't know which part is true. Again, I try to give y'all all the information I can find, and you can kind of do your own research or come up to your own theories. But speaking of love interest, it is believed that Lawrence Romero Jr. could have had a thing for Tara. And maybe this played into the murder. Maybe she rejected him. Maybe that's why he went to attack her. I don't know. There's so many possibilities. One last note. There is a website dedicated to Tara. Very simple. It's her name. TaraCalico.com. It doesn't look like it's had any updates in the last year or two, but it's there for anyone wanting to see more. Well, that wraps up this case. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Again, if you have theories of your own, let me hear them. If you have any details, share them. Don't forget to connect with us. You can find us on Instagram and WordPress. Just search for the Shrouded in Darkness podcast. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. And if there's a case from your hometown that deserves attention, send it to us. Maybe we'll cover it in a future episode. Tune in next week as we dive into the case of the West Memphis 3. Until next time, ghouls, remember, the truth is always hiding in the darkness.